Yeah, it's
Okay.
we're being live streamed.
Yes, yes, we are live on Facebook. Hello, everybody out there in cyberspace, in the interwebs. Live. Oh, wow. We've got some feedback. So, I am your host of Quick to Politic, Ernestine Lyons, and I have a very special guest here, Clarinda. I am going to read your bio and tell everybody about you, but I just wanted to also ask you, like, how was your Christmas and what are you looking forward to as the year wraps up? And what are some reflections that you are grateful for? So,
Oh my goodness. The Christmas holiday weekend was lovely. We spent Christmas Eve with family, Christmas Day with family, and did a lot of like just, hunkering down in the house and being with those closest to me. So I really enjoyed that and hadn't had a chance to do that uninterrupted in some time. So it was great. How was yours?
it was busy, busy, busy. Because I don't know, I'm that auntie who wants to like do all the things for her nephews and like get the whole family together. And I don't know, I feel like I'm moving more and more away from like materialism. And so, I just wanted us all to like be together and have great Christmases, like making memories. And yeah, it definitely was a whirlwind. And then now I'm like, ooh, I can decompress. But
Yes,
yes,
very nice.
yes.
Yeah. Your second question about reflections of 2022. I did a lot of reflective traveling this year. Uh,
Ooh.
Traveled for the first time by myself, but also did a lot of hiking and getting into nature and really connecting with myself, connecting with my closest friends and with my partner. So I did a lot of that this year and was really proud of myself. I literally jumped into the deep end of the pool as a non-swimmer and learned to swim in 4 days at an adult swim camp. So this year for me was all about facing fears, doing things that I've never done before, and connecting with self. And really proud to have been able to do that this year.
It almost sounded like an analogy, like where it was like as a non-swimmer deep jumping into the deep end of the pool and just like learning, and it's symbolic. And I don't know. I need to jump right into the introduction of you. So for those of you out there, this is the lovely Clarinda Harrison, and she is my very special guest on here because she is very dynamic. Forbes 40 under 40, and just the list of accolades goes on, but so Clarinda is currently, leading conversations on impact efforts at Michigan Central, as well as the director of the skills initiatives. She was formerly the head of equity and inclusion for Ford's autonomous vehicles and mobility businesses. And then she also served as the senior director of economic prosperity and executive director for the Detroit Regional Workforce Fund. She's worked for the MEDC. She has been a business and foundation engagement director and business engagement for the University of Michigan Dearborn. And then she's got all these years of wonderful economic engagement and development and experience. Clarinda also brings in a wealth of knowledge, having led leadership positions and with so many different organizations. And she's also a Wayne State alum, U of M, and has a master's in urban planning. And so she leads so many great conversations around DEIB. She's also a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And as I mentioned, in 2017, Crain's 40 under 40. The other one's coming. So Forbes, and the Forbes list is coming soon.
I might have aged out of that one, but one of their top
They
lists.
do they do a lot of those like top lists, like most influential. They've got like a million categories
They
for
do.
like
They
how to
do. So
celebrate people.
it
So
just won't be 40 under 40.
well, did I miss anything? Is there anything else you want to tell folks about you? And
Yeah, a couple of things that I'm really proud of this year. I started my wardrobe consulting and fashion design business, Muna Clothier.
ooh.
So
Oh.
I got to a point this fall or late summer where during month of design, I released the samples from my capsule collection that I've been working on designing. Still have a ways to go, but just really proud of doing something that I always wanted to do, but moving into a space that's completely unknown to me and just going through a full on learning process, which I haven't had an opportunity to do for a while. And my husband and I, our business, Planning Test LLC, or what we call the Everyday Sacred, is in full effect. And, we both have had some really amazing opportunities through the Everyday Sacred. And so having two businesses that I call my own is just as important as everything else on my bio.
Yes, yes. And honestly, for any of you, like, I'm quite sure, Clarinda is the woman about town, and I'm quite sure there's just about everybody. Somebody is 5 degrees separated from knowing you. But, for those of you who may not know Clarinda, when you meet her, she is so fashionable, so stylish. And, I actually didn't know about clothing and like the capsule wardrobe, but that makes perfect sense because you're always so stylish. And so,
Thank you.
ways to share that, like, are you out there on the social media world sharing the fashion aspects of things? Like, where
I
can we
am.
find you with that?
Yeah. So my personal handle is at Turban Nation. And on there, you'll see in my bio that both the Everyday Sacred is at the period Everyday period Sacred, is a handle in my bio. And then for my fashion line is at Muna, that's MOONA.Clothier. CLOTHIER. And both of those are live and active, and I encourage you to follow them as well as my personal page.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. And you know what? Like I said, like, you have like this myriad of talents, and so that's why I definitely wanted to talk to you. And I have been trying to steal Clarinda, y'all. I just want her to be like bottled in the essence of her motivation, her essence, her like energy in the room. Is something that we all want to, should want to emulate. And so I was just like, okay, you got to be on the podcast. We got to hear more from you. So,
Thank you.
I just, yeah, that was like my first question. I just kind of wanted to know a little bit more about you, if I missed anything. Um, and then the second thing is, what are some of your guiding principles and philosophies? Like, for you do a lot in Michigan's economic development sphere, and you have a lot of influence there, and you're putting together a lot of systems. So what are some things that kind of keep you focused on that mission and personal? Because it sounds like you've gone through with the just like the list of accolades. There are so many ways in which you have attained accomplishments. So I just kind of want to know, what are some of those guiding philosophies and principles when it comes to not only your personal development, but your professional development?
Yeah, so I'll start with the personal because this has been a big year for my personal development. And a couple of things that guided me through this year was running towards fear. So I mentioned that I jumped into the deep end of the pool. I think you caught on to the fact that that was sort of allegory for how I've been living my life this year. Pre 2020, pre pandemic, I think that like many people, I was just sort of existing, doing well, of course, being honored for different things that I was contributing, but not necessarily as connected to myself as I needed to be. And that became very apparent to me in 2020 and 2021. And so I had vowed to myself that I would start to really tap into who I am. And it started with addressing fears. So I am over 40, a non-swimmer, or was a non-swimmer, and really wanted to look at that as an opportunity to really push myself in a way that I had built fear around, and was inhibiting myself. So I jumped into the deep end of the pool in many, many aspects. And so I went to spend time in the Costa Rican jungle. And so my second principle that came out of that experience was really not being afraid to be alone with myself. knowing that I am safe, that I am whole, and that I have everything I need to really survive and thrive in this world. And then the third area is giving grace to myself, which then fosters my ability to give grace to others, to truly lead with empathy, in knowing that how we as humans engage every day is important to how we show up, both with ourselves and making certain that we are kind to ourselves, and that then we radiate that outward to others. So those are a few of my personal principles that I honed in on this year. Now, on a professional side, I've been really cultivating my professional philosophy for about a decade now. And it's really about how to close opportunity gaps for people who grew up like me. I am a native Detroiter. I grew up on the East Side. I still live on the East Side of Detroit. And really wanted to understand, as I was coming through the ranks as a young professional, and even prior to that, as I was attaining my post K-12 education, trying to understand why communities and neighborhoods looked a certain way depending on which zip code they were in. And I really wanted to learn more about that. I did, and that's why I studied urban planning. And throughout my career, I really vowed to figure out what tables do I need to sit at, where do I need to be, and how do I need to cultivate a practice, whether it's working with organizations as their full-time employee or starting my own business, that really flips the idea on its head that we can't progress communities, grow neighborhoods, grow economic opportunity, while also making certain that there's shared opportunity and shared prosperity at the same time.
That is really beautiful, because like I feel like all of this is you diving right into fear and then becoming very self-actualized and able to bring that authentic self to whatever conversation you're having. And I think that we, as you know, a region are better for it. We're as community, we're better for it. And you know, we have folks like you at the table who are giving voice, you know, whether it's through your work with the Everyday Sacred, or you know, your work, you know, with all of these major players in Michigan, you know, Michigan corporations. So I really think that it's really important, you know, that you brought up the idea of giving grace as a philosophy. And, you know, I think that's really important to be able to, you know, when you're going full steam ahead, to stop, slow down, and recognize that, you know, yes, you have taken major strides. And I think it goes back to the concept of people saying that they overestimate what they can do in a year and then underestimate what they can do in 10. And, you know, I think that it's beautiful to hear that you kind of went on this sort of journey. I'm sorry, my sound went out just for a second. You went on this sort of journey, you know, and it came full circle, right, as you kind of got into, you know, this pivotal age in your life. And I think that's really great for our listeners. And it kind of makes me think that one of the questions I have, that's kind of like my third question, but I'm going to go out of order here. And I want to dive right into something that you hit on, and talking about equity and economic systems. And so I want to know, where do you see your work with the Everyday Sacred in 10 years? And this is a two-parter. I don't know. I always ask these, like, you know, two-parter questions. I never ask this one question. So, you know, what are the strategies that we need in place to achieve parity in Metro Detroit, to alleviate like disparities? And then, you know, in your estimation, where are we headed in terms of Michigan and talent and intellectual capacity? There's so many conversations around, and I know that you and I were at the table at an Axios conversation where we talked about the next generation of leadership, which is another question I'm going to get into. But, you know, I'm just going to divide this up into I want to talk about the equity and, where do you see 10 years from now, the impact of the everyday sacred? And then what are the strategies in place that like every organization, no matter who is leading the work to alleviate disparities? And then I'm going to jump into that second part, which is about talent and capacity for Michigan as a whole.
Okay. So with the everyday sacred and really where it is today and where I see it going, is, my husband and I started the company in 2018 through the recognition that, Black people and other marginalized people are often relegated to the least desirable spaces and places as part of the urban planning practice. And so as trained professional urban planners who have practiced for many, many years, we started to think about our history, ancestral history in this country, as well as our present history, and thinking about, the fact that many marginalized communities oftentimes are not given choice and where they live, how they live, and it's the disparities that people face are often because of policy decisions, because of systemic ironclad systems that are truly designed to isolate and ostracize. And so we started to really self-actualize in our field as professionals, both of us having, nearly 20 years of experience and saying, we don't have to practice the way we learned urban planning. In fact, we should not. We are Black urban planners. We learned that essentially that we are the undesirables, that when you have, a majority percentage of Black people living in a neighborhood, that automatically you start to see the property values tank. And the equal opposite is true. When you start to index on the side of majority white, you automatically see appreciation. As an example of how systemic racism actually manifests in space creation, neighborhood development, and capital markets. And so we said, you know what, we're starting a practice where we're going to begin with understanding who are the people who are often impacted by these decisions. And we're going to start there in rebuilding the fundamental ways in which we work. And so the way we are looking at how we plan to grow our practice is really changing the discipline. We want to be the point of view, subject matter experts, and thought leaders for this nation around equitable urban planning, equitable urban design, and place sharing that doesn't result in disparate and negative impacts on people of color, on elderly, on people with lower incomes, people without choice that are relegated as disposable in our country. And that way, we are able to then change the discipline, change the way we practice, and really start to create a new dynamic and a new way of engaging in neighborhood development and urban planning.
Wow, there is so much to unpack, and so many different ways in which there it sounds like there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think that you can definitely see it, and I love that you talked about place sharing, because I think that in itself allows for more folks to come together and kind of see things and be exposed to different, maybe ways of living. And, particularly in cities, as you see a lot of the gentrification that started to, it's been going on for quite some time. I think that creates a whole different way in which people start to look at, who is in what space and why, and what are the systems that have resulted in this. And so, I think that that's definitely something that that everybody's going to need to keep having these conversations. And it may not be a perfect system, but the more you have the conversations, the more you work towards solutions and you beta test, because I think you will work on things and then you'll see what works and what doesn't work, what sticks, and you have to throw out a lot there. So I think that that's definitely amazing that we're able to continue this. And Detroit is definitely going through some things, and 10 years post bankruptcy, I think that we're getting some places, but we still have work to do. So
We
yes,
do. Yeah,
yes,
we
for sure.
certainly do. And it's so interesting because gentrification shows up a little bit differently in Detroit because it's a very large city with a lot of land area. We have 139 square miles. The thing about Detroit is that it's displacement by way of lack of opportunity, not necessarily in every case of completely being priced out of the city. The city is by and large still affordable for most families. Now, whether you are able to be in neighborhoods with appreciating value, neighborhoods that have quality access to schools and sidewalk and road infrastructure and adequate, trash pickup and things of that nature in areas where there's dumping, just overall quality of life factors. Now, that's where you start to see the disparities. And so people are choosing to leave at this point in time, in many cases, because they have traditionally seen opportunities to live in a neighborhood that has more quality of life features in suburbs that are surrounding the city. The challenge is, as a region, many suburbs, particularly the inner ring ones, are also losing capital, losing tax base. And so what happens in that case is that you're also starting to see some of the diminishing assets in terms of the quality of life factors that people were looking for or had traditionally seen in those areas. And so, I like to talk about gentrification as an entree into a much larger and more complicated issue. Is really about displacement by lack of opportunity and thinking about the migration patterns of African American as well as Latinx populations, where they're going and what's happening in those communities. Because in 10, 20 years, what we might see is that, the city does actually become completely gentrified. And we see Black and Brown communities living in inner ring suburbs experiencing some of the same problems that they had experienced 20, 30 years ago in the city of Detroit. And so gentrification in our city and our region is really complex, and understanding that and changing the models around place sharing is critical in making certain that we don't repeat patterns that we've seen in other urban centers across the nation.
And I think that it's interesting that you talk about urban centers across the nation. And I think Michigan is in a unique place because being a former city council person from, one of those outer ring suburbs where you do see, a mass exodus of, folks who are coming from Detroit. I know that we've had a demographic shift. We were once majority white. Now we are, 68% African American. And, but the city for a while, regardless of demographics and that shift, we have been experiencing this tax base. And so our tax base has kind of been we've been losing that. And so with that comes the city resources and things like trash collection, police and fire services, and you need those. And so then people kind of leave to come to these suburbs for a better way of life, and it's becomes this thing where now you kind of have some of the same issues that come. And I think that it's really more of an economic issue that just so happens to be kind of following some of these issues. And I know that Michigan was really hard hit by the 2008 financial crisis. And we have spent a long time trying to come back from that. Older industrial communities are definitely facing some of these problems, which makes me want to pivot right into, Michigan being affordable. And, I think that people talk about the gentrification in Brooklyn, and New York is not affordable. New York is not as affordable as Michigan. And, so I think that kind of, I kind of want to tie this into the question of, Michigan's talent and intellectual capacity. People, are we experiencing brain drain still? And how do we combat that? With your background and all of the things that you've tackled for, organizations and corporations, what is the future and how do we keep talent here? how do we, really cultivate that workforce? And will our workforce be viable to compete and to build and contribute to the economies and the industries of the future? I work for an organization that's all about supporting entrepreneurs and bringing them here because they have, skilled talent. They have these backgrounds in the STEM fields. They are, tech founders and CEOs, and they're doing these things in industries that are going to be more and more needed. But will Michigan's homegrown, Black and brown and white and everybody, are we going to be able to contribute to the future of Michigan's workforce the way that it's needed for the future?
Yeah, I certainly think we have as good a shot as any. We have a good foundation of, having the history of employing the largest number of engineers throughout the nation and really attracting people with that kind of background into our city and our state because of the automotive industry. Now, what's happening with industry, and automotive is still our number one industry. Agriculture is actually the second. The industry itself is migrating into this highly technological and highly advanced field. Just on the vehicle side, there's 36,000 computer components in a vehicle today. So it's really a rolling computer, which means that we need the kind of talent that can program, that can code, that can work on cloud-based systems, that's adept in cybersecurity, connectivity, user experience, all the things that were some of which were not jobs, 10 or 15 years ago. And then when we start to layer on beyond, vehicles and go into the broader sense of mobility and just moving people and moving goods over, air, over water, over land, now you're starting to think about drone technology. Now you're thinking about, autonomous delivery systems, autonomous vehicles, uh, uh,
Right. All
scooters,
of these, like the
automated.
21st century Jetsons kind of,
Exactly.
perspective. And you know what? I just, sorry to cut in, but I really wanted to, ask for a little bit of clarification around. I, I know that there's been the global epicenter of mobility, that, Michigan has been kind of working with the Biden administration to try to make sure that we have funding to, contribute to mobility and things of that nature. So I just wanted to ask a little bit about, like, what is meant by mobility? Are we talking about, just all of the things that you just described? Because I think sometimes people think of cars because we're Michigan and we're just thinking of that. Or does it mean the movement of people, talent, places, and, all of the things and getting them together? Or like, what exactly in corporate speak does mobility actually mean in terms of economic development?
Yeah, it the latter. It means that we are going to be, and we have been finding new ways to move people and move goods that doesn't involve traditional combustion vehicles. So that changes everything that we know, both from what's actually happening, like I mentioned, like I saw an article with KiwiBot, which is a company that delivers food on Howard University's campus. That was a company that piloted their technology right here in Detroit before they launched into the market. So it really is all of those things. And where I was going in the last question is, we need talent to support where we are and where we're going. And it's the responsibility of those of us who are working in the field of economic and workforce development to, one, make sure we understand what the needs are of industry, but most importantly, ensuring that our talent that's here and that talent who want to be here have just as good as opportunity as any to be educated with the type of credentials and the type of education that will get them access to jobs, and that those jobs are actually open and available to them. And with Detroiters, that means that we also need to remove barriers to entry that have traditionally crowded Black and brown people out due to lack of education or adequate education and other systemic failures.
Okay. Well, we it sounds like we both, like, I don't know, like for this two-part question, it sounds like there's still a lot of work to do, but we're at least identifying what conversations need to be had and how we can have them, and identifying all of the key players who need to be in the room having this conversation, and then who we need to be bringing into conversations around, these things to just kind of keep Michigan viable, and, to be competitive and to attract those folks and retain them. I know that you talked about like agriculture, and I kind of joke and say that Michigan State is Michigan Agricultural and Mechanical University, but it's just like that's kind of the origins, and that's what people come to our universities, U of M and Michigan State, because these are top universities that draw top talent, and they come from around the country, they come from around the world, and we want to keep those folks here in Michigan and give them a reason to stay, other than our nature and everything. And so it sounds like we've definitely got our work cut out for us, but we are making great inroads. And I want to pivot into a question about like the next generation. I think we were both at this panel and talking about Generation Z, and I like how people have moved right into Gen Z. And I'm like, hey, I'm a millennial. I feel like we still need to talk about millennials in the workforce who are, wanting to aspire to do the things that you have done. Reading your bio, I was so impressed. And at the age of 37, which is how old I'll be in January, my birthday's coming up, everybody, January 7th. So, but, 40 under 40 at 37, and, you were leading conversations, directing programs, and, you were making sure that people understood the impact, from an urban planning perspective and from an economic development perspective. What advice do you have for Gen Z and millennial professionals, who are aspiring to be that person who has a seat at the table and, to lead those conversations?
Yeah. What came up for me immediately in this question is just having a point of view. There is no room that I enter where I'm just neutral. I always have a perspective to offer because I believe that my professional and lived experiences lend itself to some type of contribution to the whole. And it doesn't mean that I have the right ideas or the best ideas all the time. It doesn't mean that, I need to see the outcome directly linked to, whatever it is that I feel like I contributed. But I know that when I am my responsibility, when I am in a room, is to have a point of view. And that point of view needs to be researched. It needs to be something that is unique to your own thoughts, your own experiences, something that you're willing to stand behind, and that people begin to see you as a thought leader. Having a point of view is something that will help to propel one into the idea that you are a thought leader, that you are a person who people can seek advice from, that you
Right.
can lead initiatives and programs because you'll have a point of view. So when I mentioned earlier that about 10 years ago, I started to think about, what am I going to contribute? I have the technical prowess at this point in time. I've been working for about 10 years. What is it that I'm going to bring to this? And that's when I developed my personal mission statement. I put it at the top of my resume. I wanted everyone to know, you're working with someone who has her own thoughts, her own feelings. All the other things are true about being a team player and knowing how to engage and how to give and take. But having that point of view was really important for me.
All right, you heard it first, young folks, and young at heart folks, like everybody. I really think this is information that like everyone should take this to heart, because it's important to always let people know, that you have thoughts in your head. Like, and I think that sometimes new professionals to the workforce are like, I'm just not going to say anything, or nobody wants to hear what I have to say. And, this is something that like even my partner said to me recently. He was just like, people want to know what you have to say. People admire you. They want to know your thoughts. They don't want to hear a regurgitated, kind of, I don't know. I'm really big into like motivational speakers, and I'm always saying like, Les Brown says, and it's just like, well, what do you say? So
Mhm.
I think this goes for folks who are in the workforce and they're in their 20s, and, they think that, okay, well, I need to get to so and so level before I can contribute to the conversation. And, people want to hear from a different generation because, there was a New York Times article that talked about how Gen Zers kind of, they speak their own language when it comes to growing up completely immersed in technology, growing up in the internet age. And there are ways in which, Gen X, baby boomers, and everybody can contribute to or get glean from, all of those ways in which you experience the world, and maybe ways in which they are not necessarily thinking about a solution to a problem. And so I think that is beautiful advice. And I'm glad that you reached that epiphany, that you were able to give it, and you were able to pass that nugget of wisdom to me. And I've been trying to live by that philosophy as well. So I want to close things off by kind of getting into some of the questions that, this is New Year's resolutions time, and I know I'm putting together this whole plan of like, what are my goals for 2023? I'm putting together vision boards, and, resolutions tie in with goals, and I make them SMART goals, and, put together Notion and all of these different ways in which I want to spend, the year really going after the things and the big goals and the resolutions. So let's say that it is December 29th, 2023. What are some of the visions that you have manifested for personal, professional, and, just life? What are some of those things? And I'm curious, like, to get into like how you see yourself manifesting the things that you want, by this time next year.
Yeah, so I start with my own humanity first because the human will be moving through both my personal and professional experiences. And so my goals are oftentimes centered around taking care of me first so that I can bring my best self into any circumstance that I'm in. And so I start with, how do I want to feel at the end of the year? I want to feel whole. I want to feel healthy mentally, spiritually, physically. I want to feel like I contributed, like I did good in the world, like I can be proud of, how I approach challenges, how I helped others, how I contributed professionally. And then I work backwards from there and just thinking about, what does that look like in each of my spaces? What does that look like in my partnership with my husband? What does it look like, as a parent to a Gen Zer? What does it look like as I'm thinking about building out a new initiative for my company, the company that I work for, as well as the two companies that I own? And then remembering my values and principles along the way so that when I look back, all of the things that I want to feel are intact. And that is how I know that I've been successful, that I'm not depleted, that I'm not, depressed, that I'm not feeling like I didn't take care of myself as I set out to change the world. Taking care of myself is really vital to that.
I think that response is perfect to sum up the full circle of the conversation. Started with like, this epiphany, this life-changing conversation, this diving into fear. And I love that all of it was about a holistic version of you. Are you, making sure that your family and your relationships, and none of it was material. None of it was, and I love that. And I think because ultimately that's really what we would like, what we should aspire to strive for, to make sure those relationships and things are the things that we nurture, the things that we care about. And that is what success looks like for you. And, that's truly beautiful. And it leads into my very final question. is what is the legacy that you are going to that you would like to leave, and the impact that you would like to make, imprint you're leaving on Michigan and all of your work. And I don't know, I'm always asking this question as an icebreaker, and people are like, oh my gosh, why do you ask such a it's just like
It feels
legacy.
a little
It's like this
morbid,
a little right,
I
it's morbid and it's deep. It's just like
it's like, when I'm gone, what do you
no,
want me to remember?
right, exactly. It's like, so yeah, I used this during a team meeting, and everybody's like, so, okay, now we have such a somber tone of the. It's just
No, but I totally understand what you mean. Because we all will contribute and we'll all age through this process of being here on this earth. And so, my legacy, I really want to be a change agent for good. I want, the things that I'm focused on now to continue to evolve and get bigger and better and positively impact more people, such that, all the things that I aspired to when I was sort of at the beginning of my career and really wanting to bring about life-changing experiences that gave everyone an opportunity, a fair and equal shot to realize their highest potential, that in my corner of the world, in what I do, that I have been able to do that for as many people as possible.
Oh my gosh. This is why, honestly, I don't ask everybody this question, but like every once in a while you meet that person who's so like dynamic, and like, I don't know, I felt like drawn to you since you like came into my organization, and then like lately just kind of, talking to you about ways in which to be your best self. I just really like to pick that dynamic person's brain and ask that question, because I feel like it's going to be something really impactful, and it's going to be something really powerful that will change the way we look at things. So thank you so much for being on this show, and for, letting me ask these very probing questions, and letting the audience learn more about you, your work, and the ways in which you are impacting the way we work in Michigan, the way we plan, the way that we are interacting with each other, the way we're thinking about equity and belonging. And so I just want to thank you for coming on, and for, just being so radiant. And I want to thank anybody out there. We don't have any questions, but I want to thank all of you out there for listening and for watching. And so this has been Quick to Politic, and this has been my guest, Clarinda Harrison. And thank you so much out there. And remember to keep watching Quick to Politic. And we are now going to end the live. Bye-bye, everybody in Facebook Land.
Bye. Thank you.
All right. Okay. And thank you, YouTube, for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm Ernestine Lyons, Quick to Politics host. And so thank you. Oh, and Clarinda, where can we find you? Like, are there any ways? And I know you mentioned a couple of them. I'm going to link that information.
Yeah, please. So on IG, it's at DTURBANation, DETURBANATION, and at @the_everyday_sacred, and at Muna.Clothier. On Twitter is DET_urbanista. And my website for our business, The Everyday Sacred, is www.planningtest.com.
All right. Well, thank you once again for being on. And that is our episode. Bye, everybody. Bye. If I can remember how to stop recording. There we go.